Hey guys, welcome back to Auxano, where we discuss our guests and their causes of growth or their causes of change. Today we are with a living legend, I call him. I've been using his product for a long time when I was a kid. And once we moved into the vast world of tech, I would say that his product served as the building blocks or the Legos to what navigation is today. So, without further ado, thank you so much. I would like you to introduce yourself if you could.
Oh, probably the worst, question of the day today is how to introduce yourself. My name is Chris Heivly. I am a longtime entrepreneur, a longtime investor, and now am completely geeking out on how do you build startup communities and what are you can do to create environment for more founders. The product that Bo is referring to, as one of the co-founders of Mapquest way back in the day, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. And that's my intro.
All right. Well, without further ado, let's get deep. We're going to play the usual card game. So, one of the problems I've had with some of the guests in the past was the camera couldn't pick it up, but this is what the card game looks like. So, I'll
Got it?
just ask you between left or right, and I have actually never seen these cards until now. So, if they are like inappropriate in nature, then I'll just throw it out.
No question that you can ask and that I will attempt to answer. Let's go left.
Left. Okay. Who is your favorite evil villain?
Um, uh, what's his name in the Austin Powers,
Doctor Evil.
$1 million? Dr. Evil. That's my
Doctor
favorite
Evil.
villain.
All right, Doctor Evil. I'm a huge fan of the Austin Powers series myself. It's actually kind of funny because a lot of my audience are younger, so I do wonder if they even know who Austin Powers is. Hopefully,
Yeah,
um,
I hope so because I was going to go with some James Bond character from like the 70s and really date myself.
well, moving on to our second level, it is deep. Do you want to go left or right?
Let's go left again.
Left. Okay. The question asks, name a song that makes you think of one of your friends.
Let's go with, um, I believe it's called, uh, gosh, no, let's change that up just because I'm not sure the title. I think the title is called The Wait,
The
um,
Wait.
and it's by the band.
Okay.
Um, and we've all heard it. It's been around since the 70s. And I have a very good friend who plays in a kind of a raunchy Weird Al Yankovic parody band, and they've taken that song, kind of ruined it for me a little bit, the original, but now I love the parody so much that that makes me think of him every time I hear it.
That's awesome. Do you see him live?
I do. And it's hold your cheeks laughing so hard. It's definitely kind of 21 and over, and it's for people who kind of don't mind laughing at themselves and laughing at things. It's a little bit raunchy, but it's very funny. He's The band's called the Bimini Brothers, and they're in Michigan.
Bimini Brothers in Michigan.
Yeah,
All right.
we got a plug in for him.
Yeah. So that's one thing I've been trying to work on, especially since I'm a new podcast, is trying to work on like the social media plugs of everybody that we shout out.
Yeah.
So yeah. Moving on to level three. This is deeper. Which side, left or right?
Just to change it up, let's go right this time.
Right. Wow. Uh, right asks, in what ways do you feel that you are limited?
Hmm. That is deep, deep. Um, Bo, I've spent the last really good 10 years trying to, remove any of the shackles that we either accidentally or on purpose create for ourselves that limit us. Approach, mindset, comfort, ego, all of those things. But what am I limited by today? How about if I give you two answers? I'm going to give you kind of a corny answer. I'm limited by
Please.
time. I'm limited by time. Now everyone is, but I'm in the midst of kind of trying to slow down. I've been pushing this ball forward, being an entrepreneur for 40 years. A couple years ago, trying to slow down a little bit, trying to pick my moments. I'm at another inflection point, like in the last few weeks to a month, where I'm trying to kind of unschedule things and kind of a little more time for family and fun. But I'm always wrestling with that time element.
Yeah.
That's kind of the surface level. But this is the deep question. Let me see if I can get down a little bit. It's a constant struggle to battle this thing that says, do I belong in this space? Space being kind of a really broad definition. Sometimes it's in a meeting, sometimes in a room full of people, sometimes with serious people. I sometimes have a moment where I'm like, I don't belong here. I don't have an MBA. I'm way over that, but I don't have a top tier education. I was a geography major in college. I got a master's degree in geography, not your classic kind of business stuff. So I think wrestling with that limits you, because obviously I belong anywhere that I want to be. But there's always that little friction in our heads, right? So there's the deep answer.
I definitely want to footnote that, especially when I think I wanted to ask you questions, especially as a founder on mental health advice for mental health. So I want to footnote this and come back to it. But you talked about your expertise in geography. So everybody has something that they're really nerdy about. Why was yours maps? Why was yours geography?
I've been asked a question. I don't know if I have a great answer. Alls I know is that when I was a kid, like in my early teens, for fun, I would like sketch out on paper golf courses. By the way, I've never played golf till I was in my 20s. So I remember getting a tour before you go to high school of like the vocational side. And I remember seeing, architecture. So what I know in that is that's all kind of spatial kind of things, right? Whether it's land and golf courses, whether it's houses. So I think innately in me is this kind of spatial thing, which obviously is about maps as well. And then I had an uncle who was my dad's very, very, very younger, almost brother. He was closer in age to me, to my dad, and he was a geographer. So I think he kind of maybe opened the door for that. And then when I walked in that door, I'm like, I was home. So
I gotcha. So you talked about when you were a kid, you were into geography, and the first question I usually ask everybody on the podcast is, when you were a kid, what did you want to be?
yeah. I don't really have a great answer for that. I mean, I was very malleable. I was actually a very shy kid growing up. I was tiny as hell. I wanted to play football in high school, but it's really hard to do when you weigh 85 pounds and are like 5'2" in high school. No lie, right? So I'm now 5'10" and well over 85 pounds today. Add a hundo to that, but sports was big in my family. I don't think I ever had ideas that I would be a professional sports person, but I always knew sports would be a big part of my. Up till 3 years ago, I still played ice hockey as an adult. Pandemic kind of put a wrinkle in that. Once I got into computer mapping and what we now know as GIS, Geographic Information Systems, as a graduate student in the early 80s, that stuff just turned me on. And I didn't know what an entrepreneur was, but I knew I knew I loved opportunities when there was more questions than answers.
Yeah.
Right? I was never going to be an accountant, right? Like that's way too structured. So I was very much into, I think I wanted to be an entrepreneur without knowing what an entrepreneur was. Someone who went in and figured shit out. Like that's what I knew I wanted to be.
Awesome. What life advice would you give maybe even that inner child or that young Chris Heivly? What life advice would you give him?
Chill the hell out, man. you know, I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be very driven, right? I mean, the stuff is so hard. It's why we, have the kind of the, an overly media hyped kind of like, you got to put your 80 hours a week in and, you got to burn the candle at both ends, which, is all bullshit.
Right.
But in that, always in my own head, always, trying to figure things out. And what I've learned with age, and what I would tell that person is relax a little bit. Maybe don't have the gas pedal all the way on the floor, maybe about 80% on the floor, right? And leave a little room for serendipity, leave a little room for, balance and harmony. And don't worry so much about negative outcomes because they're just new challenges to overcome.
I wanted to segue another question, kind of speaking on your younger self's experience. It was, what were the emotions you felt when MapQuest was acquisitioned? Was it relief, or did it feel like you were giving away your baby, so to speak?
Actually, neither one. So the story goes is that we baked MapQuest inside of a very large multi-billion dollar printing company.
Mm.
And so it was a long haul that started, 8, 10 years before everyone knows of MapQuest, not as an internet company, just as kind of how do you do computer mapping and how do you, bring that to the masses. Um, we launched MapQuest in 96. I sat on the board from 95 through 98. In 98, we decided to take it public with a lot of the other internet companies. At that point, they needed adults on the board. It was time for me to leave. And so it went public in 99 and purchased by AOL in 2000. And by then I was distanced. So I had left that my baby part way behind. And there wasn't since I wasn't in like ringing the bell or anything, I didn't have that exaltation or that like, oh, there goes my baby. I was already on to the next thing. So.
Yeah. What was that next thing?
Well, our largest investor gave me $25 million in 96 to go invest in internet companies. And so it was learning how to become a venture capitalist. Obviously, I was still sitting on the board representing that largest investor of the MapQuest board. So I still had ties to my baby. I still, was coddling it and making sure, giving my 2 cents about, things that we should do. It was a very complex business. The MapQuest part was just an element. We had a mapping services business. We had custom software development around mapping. So it had multiple dimensions of that business. MapQuest was just a little bit of a lark, by the way. So there was, very complex business to operate and run and make sure, and do your board responsibilities. But now I was into like another blank sheet of paper. How do you become a venture capitalist? Living in Chicago, flying every other week to California, running up and down 101, from Cupertino to, San Francisco, and looking at hundreds and hundreds of internet companies. So the one way you can kind of solve your brain about focusing on all those things is to fill it with something else. So becoming a venture capitalist over those 3 or 4 years was the next task.
In your book, Build the Fort, I love how you actually talked about how like it's a blank slate, blank page. And some people would seem kind of like guru like of like, oh yeah, like let me do this, and then they put it in their book but never talk about it. I love how you're living those principles, because you could have easily tried to start another, I don't know, another big tech company, but you decided to move in proximity to helping other startups. uh, Moving along from MapQuest into startup territory, uh, what does a founder need to have in order to successfully launch from its base and into, say, world altering recognition?
Yeah, so let me start at the end and maybe move to the beginning. I mean, to be world altering, you got to put the time in, and then we're talking about 7 to 10 years, right? Because it doesn't usually start world altering from day one, right? It starts as a little idea. You kind of grab a little niche, right? You kind of work that thing, and then you know sometimes it takes off. In my workshops, I frequently ask the question, if people remember, how long did you need a .edu address to gain access to Facebook. No one remembers that, or many people either forget or don't know that for an amount of time you had to have a .edu, like a college email address, in order to gain access to Facebook. People just assumed Facebook was a meteoric rise, right? And it wasn't. They did this crawl, walk, run thing just like most big tech companies. So the answer is 33 months, almost 3 years since Facebook launched till they opened it up to everyone. So, world altering comes years later, right? And it's at least 3, and it's probably more like 5 to 7 to 9. So the question is, what do you need to know in order to put yourself on that path? Is, it's the foundational things you do in the beginning that sets up the opportunity to all of a sudden hockey stick up and become world altering. And many founders, if not maybe most founders, try to do world altering from day one, and they don't build any momentum, and they don't build any kind of progress, and they don't lay the foundational like bricks in order to put yourself in a position to all of a sudden, catch that lightning, right, and have you, shoot up. So it's a little bit of like urgency and patience at the same time, right? You got to work hard. You got to be open. You got to have this sense of discovery in the middle. You got to kind of be experimenting and testing and trying to find product market fit, and not worrying about how do you, hire a CFO, right? Which is definitely, years later.
I remember there was a time at the workshop where there was a story you said where there was a CEO, a CFO, and then like a COO. And I think you told them to get out. But do you want to expand on your story?
Yeah, I mean, you're a startup with an idea. You come to meet with someone like me in this case, and there's 3 people, and they're all guys, right? And they're all, have MBAs or something. And I'm exaggerating this to make the story because this has happened. I'm kind of taking lots of stories and boil them into one to make the point. But, so I said, all right, guys, what's happening and who are you guys? Well, I'm the CEO and I'm the COO and I'm the CFO. And I just looked at the CFO and I was like, what are you going to fucking count? Like, there's nothing to count now.
Yeah.
Are you willing to pick up the phone and make cold calls? Are you going to write code? Are you going to go out and do, 50 customer discovery interviews? So these labels are kind of silly. And, to riff on Steve Blank, startups are not small versions of large companies. We don't need an HR head, right? But it's like, you get caught up in the labels and it's like, get out and come back when you tell me you've talked to 50 people.
Yeah. Speaking of labels, when I first met you, I did want to ask, but we just never really had time. What title was the most important to you?
Yeah, CEO title is the most important to me. The buck stops here. I've always wanted to be that person in charge, and not that I wanted to make every decision because I don't operate that way. But you know, what I learned early on was I was good at getting people excited and kind of corralled and pointing in a direction, hopefully the right direction about where to go. I think that's just ultimately that's the CEO's role, is to kind of set that North Star, set a way by which you're going to kind of hopefully kind of meet those milestones and set that foundation and get started, set cultures and all that kind of stuff, and get people excited about working together so that 1 and 1 and 1 equals 5, right? Like that's what you're trying to find, where I don't know if you ever achieve true optimization, but that's the goal. And I think that's the CEO's job. And when I learned that I was good at it, then I wanted to do more of it, right? So that label, plus as a kid you're like, I want to be the big guy.
I want to be the CEO. Yeah.
I want to be the CEO. I've been COO a number of times and had fun with that role as well, but there's nothing like kind of wearing the title, like I'm here and I'm the guy.
Yeah. If you had to pick an alternate, what would your alternate be? Would it be the COO?
It'd be probably like, because I hate the COO. I mean, not hate the CEO. I'm not, once things get to kind of an operational state, like I'm bored, right?
Hmm.
I mean, I'll help fix some problems to maybe get that set up, but I really think, kind of like a product manager. At my heart, I'm a product manager. I can see kind of how do you set up products or services to meet a certain need or an opportunity. And so I think that's in all of my endeavors, I come at it from a product point of view.
Speaking on product, I was looking at the statistic that 90% of startups fail. What is a bitter pill that all startup founders, all startup CEOs have to swallow?
That their original thesis of what the product looks like and who it's targeted for is wrong.
Hmm.
And there's a very good chance of that. And, you know, startups fail because they don't get the product market fit right. Right.
Right.
And there's three words in that: product and market and fit. So like your whole foundational is trying to discover and make sure you can find that. And most of them don't. And they don't find that because they either have the product wrong or the market wrong or both. And so that's the pill that everyone is going to swallow at some point.
I had taken notes during your workshop, but because this podcast and this entire show is essentially like a bookshelf for future years to come, would it be possible if you could explain what the lean canvas is coming from me? Because I could explain it and nobody would care. Whereas
Right.
if you explain it, people would care.
Well, on one hand, I guess say it's just another tool, but for me, it's a really awesome tool, and it's a way to visualize and potentially kind of optimize the challenges that you have in the early stages of your business. So I happen to like the lean canvas a little better than the business model canvases. They are two different things. I just think it's a little simpler framework, but they're very, very, very similar. So we'll take the lean canvas by Ash Mora, and I love his book, Running Lean. I use it as a Bible, and I tell people to read it all the time. And so the idea of the lean canvas is there's 9 cells that represent different aspects of your business. And, we all start with a thesis of what this business looks like. And so you articulate that by, in my case, I write it on, sticky notes, and you put them in these cells, these 9 cells. And when you look at that and you start bringing other people in, whether it's kind of literally the paper version, and I probably think there's kind of apps for that crap now, but I like to have a 3-foot by 4-foot canvas staring in front of me, whether it's mine or whether it's your business, so I can visualize it. And out of that, what I can start to find are maybe the 2 or 3 major assumptions about this business that we need to go test. And so if part 1 is being able to articulate and visualize the elements of your business and your original thesis, part 2 is what are the things we got to validate in order for us to have, be able to go forward. And so I think it's a really useful tool for, especially with multiple founders or founders who are really good at working with advisors and mentors, to say, hey, take a look at this and what do you see? Right? How'd I do?
I'm definitely gonna look back on the podcast and go like, "I'll write that down." Especially when, yeah, because when I was getting exposed to business originally, I thought it was as simple as have customer, sell to customer. Which I mean, at the end of the day, to make a sale, I guess it is. But there's so much of a complex inner working and a system that you have to fall upon to even get there. I thought it was as simple as A to B, when in reality it was like A to D to B to Z. So yeah.
Well, let's just pick on that for a second. So, I love the approach of sell something, right? Because most product people, most developers, whether you're, an actual software developer or, just the builder of the business, we focus so much on product, and most of those people stop and don't think about how to sell something to a customer. So I like the idea of go freaking sell something. However, sell what to who? And people miss that because I say every dollar is not created equal, right? So if you're trying to find product market fit and selling something is a validation piece, but are there more like that person, or did you just get lucky and find that one sale, right? And so again, not every dollar is created equal. I want to sell something or attempt to sell something and see whether this group of people kind of like it, that they could be my, original, kind of beachhead markets. And if not, then let me pivot to a different customer segment. Do you know what I mean? So um, that's where the little bit more of the complexity of the canvas can come in, because there's a whole customer segment part that I love and I think is the most critical part. And we need to find whether they're a real good beachhead customer that allows us to get our product going, get some momentum, get some confidence, start selling to them, start generating revenue, and then figure out how to expand from there.
I was reading a quote that it's far easier to re-improve and retain a customer than it is to ever get new ones.
Yeah,
Uh,
acquire.
yeah, what were some of the approaches that you guys made when you were pivoting uh, any product, whether it be at Techstars or Mapquest?
Yeah. Um, well, I'll tell you an interesting story. I was parachuted in as COO with the CEO I had worked with before to a company, a software company that was kind of had a leadership position, but had kind of maxed out about 22 million in sales, losing 7 million a year in a time when 2007, 8, where the economy was ready to tank. And this was a kind of $150,000 software and services sale.
Mhm.
And so what I found was that we were trying to be all things to all people. So even at that level, even though we had some product market fit, I thought we were way too broad, that we needed to focus down to a few segments, and that we could spend a lot more time just in those segments, acquiring those customers, using references and all the work we had done, as opposed to opening up new sectors. Um, so that's where, like, every dollar is not created equal. A sale in this sector, let's just say, like, oil and gas companies, but I sold one, does not a trend make, right? But I had 30 banks that work with me, and there's 1,000 banks. So why don't I just spend more time here, craft language and marketing and messaging around that sector and go as deep as I can, and then start thinking about what adjacent sectors, probably not oil and gas in this example. So I'm kind of reversing your question a little bit. It wasn't about, here I was using kind of the elements of the canvas to actually refocus an existing business as opposed to starting a new one. For about 12 years, I did that role where investors would parachute me in to get a company unstuck, as opposed to starting my own businesses. And after about 10 years of that, realized I wanted to go back to doing my own thing.
Yeah, you made a point about 30. Was it 30? But not even 30 banks, like 1,000 banks. I'm actually learning now the process of what leverage really means. So when I was trying to start just even my small media company, I was trying to buy every single piece of equipment. I was trying to buy every single piece of lens, every camera body, down to the MacBook and even the mouse. Uh, but what I found was I didn't know that your company credit doesn't actually affect your personal. So if I have the permission to ask, how did you use, or how did you and the team of founders use that leverage to start? And it doesn't even have to be MapQuest. It could
Right.
be your consulting firm that you have now. It could be at Techstars, but could we get a short masterclass on leverage?
Yeah. I mean, even with some success, and, the financial success is one piece of that's come with it. I'm still, like, love dollars and hate to deploy them unnecessarily.
Hmm.
By the way, that might be a little bit limiting sometime because I'm still kind of a thrifty kind of guy. But as part of the workshop, you may or may not remember a slide that says, "What can you kind of buy, build, barter, or borrow?"
Yeah,
Right?
my favorite.
And you know, to your point, like at that point you were like, I got to buy this, I got to buy this. And it's like, okay, well, startups run out of time and money. Time not finding product market fit, money deployed in avenues that aren't actually to the, help you get to where you need to get to. And so I always like to keep more, powder in my pocket. And and in the barter / borrow, I also mean people. I've done a lot for a lot of, people. And so at times, you call them up and say, hey, and I'll give you a perfect example. There's a couple that I've known for years. I helped them get their business started years ago, made a bunch of introductions on their behalf. I've been a reference for them. I've been that kind of third brain when they kind of are thinking about what to do. And about a month and a half ago, I was in the course of about 9 keynotes in about 12 or 14 weeks. And I woke up, actually didn't wake up, but I kind of was heading, woke up that day, got on an airplane, and I'm like, I need a new talk track. Like this one's tired. And so I like spent the whole airplane ride, writing that script on my phone, pages and pages in the notes app. And then I sent it to them and I said, what do you think? And I said, I'm going to need a whole new set of slides. I don't want to use the same format I've always used. Do you guys have any ideas? Like, or anybody that could help me, and I'm willing to pay. And they go like, the immediate response was, this is awesome. We got your back. We're going to help you out, because they're kind of designers, right? So I tell that story to say, even with my, success and my, my financial success, and even though they're a group that I've known for, God, probably at least 10 to 15 years, they were happy to help me. I'm always happy to help them. We were riffing on maybe doing a show about AI a couple months ago. Maybe it'll come back, but like none of that is like a transaction. It's just helping each other out. And, if you put the time in, then you can leverage those things, like not in a transaction way, but just like, hey, can you help me? What do you think? And it's everything from mentorship to advice to product to services, to equipment. And I just think, the lesson here is that be smart about that. You don't have to own everything. You can rent, people and rent time and rent things. And, especially since if you know what your next set of milestones are, how does that support that as opposed to kind of like a vanity purchase? Mm-hmm. Well, now I got 4 cameras. I must be a really big business guy, right?
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, that was a little long-winded, but
No. I mean, I really love that, because that's actually the really the premise of the podcast, especially mine. It's just because I think a lot of times too, me personally, I can definitely get in my head when asking for favors. Yeah. So even though it's a reciprocity of value, I find myself like even at 757 Startup Studios, there are, I call them my big brother and big sister agencies. I'm so hesitant to ask, hey, do you guys not have enough like videographers, photographers, or even people you want to interview? Can I take them on? Yeah. And so it's this.
Stop that right now, Bo.
Yeah, it's this imposter syndrome, I think.
Throw that shit away. Yeah, you just. Yeah, that's limiting, right? So this is where we limit ourselves, right? And I probably was like that. I probably had I got to build everything kind of mindset earlier. Mm-hmm. That just takes a lot longer, puts a lot more pressure on. Why not? And by the way, I see it in my, I got a 40, 36 and 30-year-old, and, I see it in their businesses. They feel like they got to figure everything out. I'm like, there's this world out there. Like, go faster, better by developing these relationships and giving first, and then, then being able to say, hey, you guys got any ideas on this, or do you need any additional videographer help? I'm happy to step in if you need.
Yeah, I actually
get over it, you youngsters.
Hey, you heard it from the man himself. You guys have no excuses. I don't have any excuses. I've actually been listening to, not really listening, but I've been seeing a lot of Alex Hormozy clips. Just like out on like TikTok or Instagram, where he actually talks about the same thing. Where I think
What's TikTok? What's Instagram?
Are you being serious? Or? Okay.
I don't use either.
Okay, all right.
Believe it or not.
Do you use any social media network?
LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook for family and friends. You know, I'm every day I wake up, I'm like, the hell with Twitter. I'm done. Um, but that might be an emotional response, but that's it. And by the way, I still count in that big bucket email, and I
Oh
have
yeah.
a 8,000 plus email list. I send someone else, stuff out, a blog post out, and thoughts every week. And so, yeah, between that and writing books, and I used to write for Inc. magazine. That's my kind of media push. Um, I don't think my audience is on TikTok or Instagram, so I haven't,
Mm,
I haven't decided to invest in that.
gotcha. Your product market fit, so to speak.
I think I got my product market fit in these other vehicles. Plus, I'm good. I am toying around with you know a little YouTube channel and adding video aspect to it, and
Yeah.
I still haven't figured out what the form is of that, but I'm playing around with it in my head. And so if that ends up on TikTok, I don't think so. Maybe just a little YouTube channel, little references from my webpage, whatever. We'll see. Remember, I'm trying to constrict
Yeah.
activities, not expand.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. Well, okay. I do want to ask if it's long form content like now, would you be willing to move on to those? Because now there's Opus AI to where if you're talking about exactly what we're talking about, it's actually what I'm going to use. I shotgun it out to Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, but it's an AI that does it called Opus, and it clips up everything. And in an attempt to make it viral, quote unquote, but I think it takes the most prominent information of if it was like, let's say, an hour long podcast, it would clip it up and it could disperse it for you. I do think that it, it's kind of like how a lot of Americans now don't have like the recipes of their ancestors. I feel like if it's a crime if you don't post on that stuff because
Yeah.
they might be losing your wisdom. In my opinion, that's just my
Yeah.
opinion.
So, Bo, I don't disagree with anything you just said. However, with the prospect of being a soon to be 64-year-old man who's trying to spend 2 or 3 days a week and not 6 days a week,
I got you.
who is not necessarily trying to, super, build a brand and build a business. That's my epiphany. I'm done building businesses.
Mhm.
So I speak from stage a lot. So I do a lot of conferences, a lot of keynotes. I want to continue writing, and I'm willing to give up maybe those extra 20% of my potential customers by not working that hard to figure out how to go find them.
Yeah, that's fair. That's
So I mean,
fair.
believe me, I've wrestled with this for 2, 3 years. Like I need to be on all these platforms. I need to, to do all the different formats, short, long, video, text, right? I need to do all those things only to go, I don't, the people, I'm a big Seth Godin fan. I have my 1,000 rabid customers, and they'll help propel me to other places if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They'll bring people to my formats as opposed to me having to go to them.
Yeah.
That's how I can sleep at night.
Yeah, 100%. I get it.
And
Uh,
if I lose a bunch of people in your generation, then that's okay, because
yeah.
bigger isn't always better.
Yeah, I'm actually starting to really resonate with that. Maybe as I get older, I actually just turned. I mean, okay, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I just turned 26. I know that's super young.
You're
um,
just starting.
yeah, just starting. But I feel like, I mean, I love bourbon. Like I got like the old man soul. But I've realized that because of my real estate investments, if I decided to stay single for the rest of my life, which I hope that that's never the case, and I don't want a family, I'm like lean fired. If you know what the fire movement was, so I think fire was financially independent, retired early. So I'm not like fully retired, so to speak, but if I didn't have to work a corporate gig, I don't have to
Yeah.
because of the real estate investments that I've worked really really hard for. There's a guy named Justin Welsh on LinkedIn also, where he talks about the solopreneur, um, solopreneur Saturdays, where he would, instead of being super famous on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat, whatever the medium is, um, just focusing on the main value and the title being a good father for family. So I really resonate.
Yeah.
Although it, I still think it is a bit of a shame that you don't want to post on the young apps, but it makes sense because you're at the stage of life where, at this point, like money probably doesn't mean a whole lot. Being called like super CEO doesn't means little compared to being called dad.
Yeah. By the way, if it was easy, I'd be on everything. I just don't want to put the time in.
I
But
totally
you got me thinking again. So I might have to reach out, post this, and ask about Opus AI and what it really
yeah.
means. The thing is, as a content person, which is basically what I am, I try to create thought leadership. That's what I always think about, and I think about content that I hope resonates with people, that makes people think or think a little differently.
Mhm.
Um, in the spirit of that, I'm always thinking about how to, with certain amount of effort, what is the gain? And I'm always toying with that. I think expressing via video is something I could imagine, in the next 6 months trying out something. And the way I typically do this, I treat this just like a startup. Is I'll arrive at a kind of form or format that I think makes sense for me. I will produce 8 or 10 episodes, pieces, whatever it is, and then push that out and see what happens,
Mhm.
and have enough to kind of do a decent test, but not enough because I don't do the one and push it out, and then you're like, oh shit, now I have to do another, right? Like
Right.
I don't want to feel like that. I want to get a little bit of a book of stuff, try different things, and then see what happens. So I wouldn't be surprised in 2024 if you see me add some video medium to this thing.
It'd be amazing. I will say that maybe, yeah, even me giving you the content might change your mind, because it's what I've been doing for all my podcast guests, to where I put it in Opus. It's like, I think it's like $20 a month, or like 288 a year or something to make it cheaper. I failed algebra twice, so that math probably doesn't make sense. Just to let you know, but yeah, like it essentially cuts and scores on a virality of 100 to maybe 70, and then it gives you clips. So I'm hoping that, and every podcast guest gets Final Cut. So I'm hoping that the AI itself, when I give it to you, probably in a zipped folder through your email, it might convince you. Who knows? Um, but you did talk about book. So as much as I really, really, really want to keep talking about the tech stuff and the finances and the business and the leverage, I'm also an aspiring novelist for a fictional novel. So it doesn't, maybe it doesn't compare to the guides and the wealth of knowledge that you've created. But um, what does your writing system look like? From balancing kids, being a husband, companies, etc. What does your writing system look like? Because you have to put in a lot of time to write books.
Yeah. So, I've written 2 books in the course of about 6 or 7 years. And I have 2 more or 3 more nonfiction books kind of specked out and considering writing a piece of fiction for the first time.
Nice.
That one seems to be kind of resonating a little bit more because it's such a big challenge and I love the challenge. Typically, when I write, I'm a classic. And by the way, the 2 books that I've written while I also had a full time job. So you had to be very intentional about a system, right? And so my system was alter my lifestyle a little bit by getting to bed a little earlier. I don't like to set an alarm, so let me wake up naturally,
Mm,
hopefully in the 5 to 5:30 range. Hit a treadmill, do something just to get my body going, grab a shower, go down, and then write for an hour, 5 days a week. Usually not weekends, unless some weird circumstance, like the family's all gone and I have nothing to do. Weekends are for family while I was working. And so, but 5 days a week would write for at least an hour. And my system is very kind of, I call it Frankenstein writing.
Frankenstein.
Before I start writing, which is why I haven't written this piece of fiction yet, and this novel that I have kind of arc in my head, and I have some pieces of sitting right over there on the whiteboard. What I do in terms of my nonfiction writing is to build an outline, and I will take weeks building that outline, and that outline could be 6, 7, 8 pages long. And it's literally like 1A, 1A, 1, right? And it's kind of the pieces of the book. And so that outline is really the Bible and the starting place. And then what I do is when I sit down to write, I just go in order. I pick 1A, 1B or whatever it is. And I have a word or a phrase or an idea, a sentence there. And I'm like, now write everything you can about that. And so, the outline's sitting there, the writing doc is sitting there, and I just, and I can't stop until I finish all my thoughts on that topic, on that line. And I can't open up another one unless I know I'm going to finish. So the idea is that you pour all the pieces, like parts in Frankenstein out there. And when you're done, then you can go back and start kind of reading in, reformatting, sometimes add, like, hey, I forgot something, or add new, and then start to make it flow. So I write pieces, and that makes it easier for me. Was that too much info?
No. I have a bad habit of writing when I feel like it. Not necessarily like, okay, like I'm gonna write Monday, and then like I'll wait a month. It does.
I don't think you can get there.
Yeah.
So I know. Sorry, I jumped in.
No, please go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think writing is definitely a muscle, and the more you use it, the easier it gets. And, Bo, you're talking to a guy who was told in high school, who in college failed freshman English because I couldn't write. Not a D, I got an F. I got hundreds in all the grammar tests, but I had this jerkweed professor who said, your writing stinks. And I'm like, okay, well, your job is to help me make it better. Obviously, I know how to form sentences, right? And it wasn't until I got to grad school where a professor sat down and said, it just gave me a couple simple lessons about how to write, right? And then years later, running into the publisher for Inc. magazine, said, hey, you tell great stories. I'd love you to write these stories down. And so writing, close to 450 pieces, I think, or I can't remember how many I wrote for Inc. magazine over the course of 5 years, but it's definitely a muscle. So the more you do it, the better you get, the more, it's easier. And especially when I did all the front work. So by the way, I write a blog post every week. I have I say a Word doc, but it's a Google Doc now, but the links, the Word doc used to sit right on my home screen. And whenever I had a thought like, oh, that phrase sounds interesting, I'd write it down. I have 3 pages of ideas sitting there. When I wake up Monday morning, I'm like, time to write a blog post for this week. I just read down and I go, okay, what seems to inspire me? And I can be in and out of a blog post within 45 minutes because the muscle's there.
Right.
And, pour it all out, walk away, come back 15 minutes later, start to edit it, walk away, come back, do one more, add some links, out the door it goes.
Yeah, it looks like I need to go to the writing gym.
Yes, you need to go to the writing gym.
Yeah, 100%. Because I've been on chapter 16 for like 3 years.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad.
Bo, the lesson that I was taught that I didn't figure out when the simplest little stupid thing, which we all know, I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't know already, that professor in grad school said is, and by the way, this is before computers. This is with, freaking paper and pen, right?
Wow.
What he told me was, stop writing the last version the first time. Like, write down your thoughts.
Yeah.
You'll go back, you'll cross stuff out, you'll move things around, but vomit on the page and then go back and edit it later. And I was trying to like craft it perfectly the first time, and no one does that. So
I would do better.
vomiting, a lot more vomiting.
More vomit, more vomit, less perfection. I love it. I love it. Well, uh, moving on from even the writing, I think it's super important to talk about mental health. So, as somebody who's been in the field for a very long time, who has pioneered a lot, uh, what are some mental health tips that people can have from you? Mental health wisdom that you could share?
Yeah, geez, there's 3 or 4 thoughts. Let's see if I can semi-organize them. If not, just listen. I'm going to
More
vomit my
vomit.
more vomit. I'm going to
More
take
vomit.
my own advice. Well, let's start with one is being self-aware enough to know that what you read about them in the media and what the stories that people like to tell about how entrepreneurship is done is almost all bullshit, right? Like 80-hour weeks and, just push, 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 and, you know, all commitment, that's not good or true, or that's not real, right? That's like a media artifact. And so have enough self-awareness to know that's not what's expected, and that, you don't, there's actually a point of way diminishing returns on that. The output you get after probably hour 60 is probably useless, right? And maybe even negative, right? Not just additive. So one of the ways you can become aware, which kind of leads to part two, is to have a good network of people that you know and trust. From the workshop that's really important to me. It's a thing I learned kind of later in life. It's part of that, barter and borrow and advice and mentorship is to, have the 2 to 4, maybe 5 people that are going through the same journey, maybe at different stages or phases, and getting to know them enough and developing a relation enough that you can kind of go, hey, this is what I'm doing. What do you think? Right. And have people, the kind of people, when you develop relationships, that'll go like, dude, what are you doing? Right. Like, you don't have any balance or harmony right now.
Mhm.
So that's just kind of like in the setting yourself up. Um, I believe that entrepreneurship is definitely more of a team sport than a solo sport. That doesn't mean you have to have co-founders, but if you don't have co-founders and a really healthy co-founder relationship, you at least have to have those advisors, mentors. And I don't mean like formal, like just, kind of friends, right? People that you meet in the studio, or people that you meet on business, and people that you just network with that you just seem to hit it off with. That's been beneficial to me, and I'll put a pin on that and come back to a couple stories as I try to organize my thoughts, organize the vomit. Um, when I say when you're the only one in the room, every decision is perfect.
Mhm.
You got to get other people in the room with you. Again, not necessarily employees or co-founders, but even, advisors. And you got to be willing to be vulnerable and kind of, open up the kimono and share with people what's in your head.
Right.
I don't think there's one founder out there that doesn't have doubts, imposter syndrome, questions about if they know what the hell they're doing. And we're kind of taught that we have to hide those things, right? We have like our public face, and then we have our kind of private face. And if there's a big gap between those two, I think that's really bad, right? Those should be, you should be more open and vulnerable in public, and you should, and not be hiding a bunch of stuff. Um, and lastly, you got to know when to ask for help, and you got to know the signals. And there's so much written out there today. This is so much better today than it was 20 years ago. And there's people that will take that call, right? And I told you, put a pin in it. After I shut down my accelerator in Raleigh, Durham, and that vehicle gave me a brand and a presence and a kind of, not an authority per se, but someone that was out front. And then I started saying, well, what am I going to do without that? Stupidly, right? Because most mental health issues are that we get ourselves into a hole because of our own making, right?
Right.
And I started to convince myself that I lost everything because I was shutting down the accelerator. And I went to lunch with a friend, not even like a super great friend, but a good friend. And we sat down and she said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Nothing." Private face, public face.
Ah,
And she's like, "I'm calling bullshit. You're not, you're not you." And so they have the moment right there. Do I just keep with the public face?
yeah,
She's not a client, she's not a customer, she's not a co-founder, she's not an employee. And I kind of went, here's what I'm thinking. And so she grabs her phone. She goes, "All right, I'm canceling my next meeting and we're having lunch again tomorrow and we're going to talk this through."
mhm,
It was as simple as that. We just had to talk it through. She had to call bullshit on me and a couple, like, why would you think that? You're going to do this, this, and this, right? I'm like, yeah, okay. So, you know,
yeah.
I don't know.
I
What do you
I'm a huge fan of the best affirmation is self, but I find that in life, when you are at your worst and your lowest, and I think the military and maybe being in like martial arts team sports has taught me this too, is yeah, not always actually. It's a favorite word that I've picked up recently. My Muay Thai coach, his name is Coach Adam. He owns Shift Combat Sports out here in Newport News, Virginia. He is in love and uses the term Ubuntu. It comes from an African tribe, and it means "I am because we are." And sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail. And those two quotes slash words, or those two phrases, have taken me so far in life. And if it wasn't the support of random individuals that I've met, or even people like yourself who I've looked up to and never even would have dreamed to talk to, um, would I have just existed merely in my own hole, in my own head. That's definitely got to be a quote card. Your voice is, what did you say? Your voice is the loudest when you're alone in the room?
Well, when you're alone in the room, every decision is perfect.
When you're alone in the room, every decision is perfect. That's a Chris Heivly quote card right there.
Yeah. I mean, there's no one there to call you on it, right?
Yeah.
So, um, yeah. I mean, it really took me, 10 to 15 years ago where I finally kind of realized like, lean on people. Don't be afraid to lean on people. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Don't put on this public face that
Mhm.
that you think you have to put on. Those are artifacts that we create on our own. So
Yeah.
stop doing that. And maybe out of that, there's less tension and less room for kind of, mental health issues. But
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I'm not a psychologist and I don't do this as a profession. I've met plenty of entrepreneurs. I've been through some of my own stuff. Nothing compares to some people. Um, but yeah, use your, use your, use your network, use your friends, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Make use of everybody. Um, Unfortunately, we're getting close to closing time, which I
Yeah.
absolutely hate because I love talking to everybody who's been on the podcast and everybody that will come on. Um, but I actually wrote down some closing thoughts. Was just for what is your advice to fathers?
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, I don't walk through an airport today that I don't see a little 8, 10-year-old boy and go, wow, my 30-year-old, I spent a lot of time on airplanes while he was growing up, and I have some regret today about that.
Hmm.
I'm trying to make up for lost time, but, because now I have that. But just really question the time away from home. I'm of a generation where you got on airplanes and you went to see people. Obviously, it's not that way today with Zoom and other things, but really kind of maybe question yourself because maybe that's part of that thing. Like you think you have to wear that suit that I'm the traveler, and then when you're home, be as engaged as you can be because there might be some regrets years later.
Yeah. I'm careful asking this question, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. But what are your regrets as a father?
Well, that's the big one, right? Not as you just can't be as engaged. And thank God I had an amazing wife who kind of held the family together at home and, served multiple roles. But, it is hard to be a successful entrepreneur. The companies get bigger, the pressures mount. I was always really good weekends and on vacations. I could turn the business off. If I'd done my job right and set the business up with the right people, it should be able to run without me, at least for a weekend or a week or whatever.
Yeah.
Gosh darn it. So I was good at balancing that, but spending a little bit too much time on airplanes and letting that, I probably could have dialed that down a little bit more and been more present at home.
I gotcha. Do you have any advice for aspiring writers?
Write often.
Vomit.
Write
Vomit often.
Just write and show it to people, and it's a muscle, so it gets better and better the more you use it.
And any advice for the young entrepreneurs out there? I know that this podcast is essentially just a whole masterclass on why you should start or attempt, but
yeah, get out of your guest bedroom, your basement, your kitchen table, and get out and talk to people. Bo, you and I started, and you mentioned something like, something about like the 757 studios, which you work at, and there's a group of people here, like, to this point about, not doing this solo, like you gotta learn by talking to people kind of the way you do it. Not that there's one way, but there's better ways to utilize your time.
right.
But get out into that world there, and it's a friendly world, right? Like entrepreneurs want to help. Like it's a small niche group and we're all friendly and, we've had help. So we want to give back. So, sitting there solo thinking you got to have all the answers is you're already, dead in the water. Get out whatever town or city or place you are, go find where the entrepreneurs are hanging out, go attend a coffee or a beer social and ask questions and tell them what you're thinking and then listen.
Do you have any closing thoughts, questions, or any closing comments?
If you're wired to do this, give it a shot. Give it a shot when you're younger, when you have less, constraints on you, and have fun with it. And if it's not for you, then go be the number 2 or 3 or number 5 employee at a startup and let them make all the decisions. But you have all the fun of being in a startup. So, being the CEO of a startup isn't maybe for everyone, but everyone could be in a startup and have fun with it. So, and if not, there's lots more. You don't just get one grab at the brass ring, right? There's lots of grabs. So there'll be something for you after. So give it a shot. And I hope to see you somewhere.
Give it a shot. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening to Auxano. This is the legend Chris Heivly. So thank you guys so much for tuning in and take care.